So we started. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. 你说呢？我呢，首先呢，要感谢一下呢，就是说这个MassMocha 的 Director Joe
First, I'd like to thank MassMocha Director Joe.
他呢就是对这个凤凰呢特别的喜欢，因为我最早来的时候呢，我们拿了一本我们这个凤凰这个画册啊，然后我给他看的时候，他从自己的书包里拿出一本跟这是一样的，他说我早就知道你这个凤凰。
He really loves the Phoenix. The first time I came to visit MassMocha, I brought a copy of the Phoenix catalog to show him. And when he saw it, he pulled out his own copy and said, "I've already seen this before."
另外，我想呢介绍感谢这个William 学院的这个John Canova。
I'd also like to thank Jane Canova of Williams College.
然后呢，当然呢也想感谢就是所有的为这个展览和为了今天这个讲演这个活动，促成这个活动的所有的人。
And of course, I'd also like to thank everyone who was a part of making this exhibition and this event, this lecture tonight a possibility.
今天呢，我主要是把在 MassMocha 展览的几件作品呢，我做一个简单的一个介绍。
Tonight, I'm primarily going to make a simple explanation of the works that are on exhibit at MassMocha.
当然之前呢，我先放两张呢，这个非常传统、非常古典，看上去有点傻的这样的东西。
But first, I'm going to put up two images of things that are very traditional, very classical, things that almost seem silly.
我为什么放这个呢？因为呢，这个呢实际上是我的最早在中国的时候受到的艺术教育的主要的训练的内容。
The primary reason I'm showing these is that they show the training that I received when I was in China.
在中国呢，你想成为一个艺术家呢，在当时呢有两条，一个是呢你要进行这个长期的严格的这样的欧洲的19世纪的素描的训练。
In China, to become an artist, there were two paths that you had to take. One was to enter deeply and seriously study the sketching and drawing studies of 19th century Europe.
另外一条呢，就是你得到这个工人、农民的解放军的中间去生活，和他们呢感情非常的接近，这样呢你才有可能成为一个很好的表现他们的情感的艺术家。
The other path was to come into contact and go amongst the workers and farmers and the People's Liberation Army and to experience their emotions. And only then would you be able to express their emotions.
对，当然了，这个都是由于当时的冷战时期呢，中国呢其实和世界是隔绝的。
Of course, this is connected to the Cold War period, the separation between China and the rest of the world at the time.
在整个的西方呢，都在进行现代艺术试验的时期呢，中国呢却一直在进行这种写实主义的严谨的训练。
When the West was involved in experimental contemporary art, China was involved with doing very traditional realist art.
当然这样的训练呢，作为一个中国艺术家呢，这是你的历史。就是怎么样回看这些历史是我们的一个课题。
As a Chinese artist, this training is part of your history. So the question is, how do we look back at that aspect of our histories?
对，但是现在呢，我觉得呢，实际上，这种训练呢，虽然我们可以说浪费了很多的时间，但是呢，对我后来的艺术的发展呢，其实是有帮助的。
And thinking back on it, I realized this type of training could be seen as being a great waste of time. But it had an incredible value and help to me as an artist.
比如说这次在这个 MassMocha 的工作，有些东西呢我要求这么高，可能呢 Joe 呢要求这么高啊，但是最后我还是说这样高比较好。最后呢他们做完了以后，最后我来看呢，我觉得和我感觉的有点出入，我觉得一定要改成还是我要的这么高。
In even working here at MassMocha on this exhibition, when I asked for it to be a certain height, and Joe said it should be at this height. And it ended up at this height, and I saw it, and I came back and looked, and I realized that, in fact, it would have to be at the height that I demanded.
所以呢，我在很多的美术馆工作呢，当然也许主要的个儿高的原因，对。
I've worked at many museums, and perhaps it's because Joe is tall.
当然，这个所以很多 museum 跟我工作呢，最后都觉得这个艺术家呢特别的挑剔啊。
So a lot of museums, after having worked with me, began to think that this artist is so picky.
但最后呢，做完了以后呢，大家都很喜欢我，因为觉得这人呢，只为了把这作品做得更好。
But in the end, they all like me because they realize that this artist, this person, is doing it to make it, when they see it at the end, doing it to make it even better.
因为我们呢，就是说我呢对形呢特别的敏感，是因为我们画过太多的这种 David 的这样的训练。
I'm very, very sensitive to forms because I've drawn so many of these Davids.
这是我当时画的风景画。
This was a landscape that I drew at the time.
其实我不太喜欢人，不太喜欢画人，所以我就画了很多这种风景。
I don't really like to draw people, so I drew more landscapes.
现在这些作品呢，有一部分呢在这个牛津的这个 Ashmolean Museum 的展览。
A portion of these works are currently on display at the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford University.
所以呢，他们的专家说，哟，这个人的素描画的很好啊，而且呢，和这个什么梵高啊，什么这些，比沙罗啊，什么这些作品在一起，但是我说呢，这个其实在中国很多艺术家呢，只要艺术学院毕业的都会画这种东西。
And so many experts had looked at my drawings and said, wow, these are amazing in comparison to the works by people like Van Gogh and other artists in the exhibition. But what I've thought is that, you know, any Chinese artist that's been in the Chinese Academy can draw like this.
我90年来美国以后呢，其实我来的目的呢，就是想了解西方的现代艺术到底是怎么回事。
In 1990, I came to the United States, and my primary motivation, my goal, was to understand exactly what this contemporary art actually was.
那个时候呢，我其实做过一些小型的一些试验。
At that time, I'd already done some small-scale experiments.
这个呢是一个 installation 呢，在 PS1 做的啊。
This is an installation that I did at PS1.
对，它实际上是一个用 Mulberry 这个 Mulberry 做的一束花，这束花很大，差不多有2米多高，但是上面呢其实是放了很多的 silkworm。
In fact, it's an arrangement of many, many mulberry leaves, and inside, I in fact placed silkworms.
但是 silkworm 呢开始吃这些桑叶，但是呢1-2天以后呢，这些 silkworm 就开始做茧，所以呢这束花呢就变成了金色的、银色的茧做成的一束花。
And after a few days, as the silkworms ate the mulberry leaves, it changed into this cocoon arrangement of gold and silver coloration.
这件作品开始呢，其实我开始体会到，怎么样用中国的一种传统的哲学的方式来处理当代艺术，或者处理 installation art。
With this work, I really began to understand or began to experiment with how to use traditional Chinese philosophical approaches to approach contemporary art.
这个 silkworm 这个系列呢，其实当时是差不多在92年的前后做的。
This series of silkworm works was done around 1992 thereabouts.
这些 moss 呢，做茧做的这个书和这些 silkworm 呢，它用吐司 cover some 一些东西，对。
So the silkworms were laying eggs and spinning cocoons and spitting silk onto these objects.
都是在展厅发生的。
And this was all taking place in the gallery.
这个呢是一个 silkworm VCR， 是在当时在这个 SOHO 的这个 Jack Tilton 做的。
This is a silkworm VCR, which was done at the time at Jack Tilton's gallery in Soho.
实际上我把 silkworm 放在这个 machine 里面，但是这些 machine 呢在里面，这些 silkworm 在里头做茧啊。
And I put the silkworms inside the VCR, and they were spinning cocoons within the VCR.
但是呢，有意思是这个 VCR 呢仍然在工作。
And what's interesting is that the VCR continued to work.
所以我 link 了一个这个 monitor 啊，这个 monitor 图像就是这里面的东西啊。
And I attached a monitor, and what was being shown on the monitor was what was happening inside the VCR.
实际上呢，就是说，看这个作品呢，它有我们的一个，就是说，在一个就是说视觉上的一个时间差。
So in fact, this work is a kind of time difference in our concepts when we see it. The time
在
lapse.
我们的 visual 是吧
in our visual sensibility.
？Yeah，这是很早期的一些作品，这样的作品其实我做过比较多啊。下面呢，我开始介绍一下在这次展览上的一些东西。
Those are some of my earlier works. I've done many of them, but now I'm going to begin talking about some of the works in this exhibition.
在这个展览里面呢，有2幅作品呢是我的书法作品。
In this exhibition, there are 2 works that are considered my calligraphy works.
这些书法都是由这样的文字写成的。这些字呢看起来像中文，但是其实它是英文。
These calligraphy works use these characters that appear to be Chinese but are actually English.
这是 ART， 这是 FOR， 这是 THE， 这是 PEOPLE。Art for the people。我在展览的时候呢，实际上我是把这个想法呢做成了一个教室。
In the exhibition, I took this idea and turned it into a classroom.
观众进入这个教室呢，他可以有教科书，有黑板，有这个电视教学，有教学挂图，有笔墨。
When the audience entered the exhibition, there were instructional books, there was the blackboard, there were video instruction and instructions on the wall.
当然呢，最早的他们认为呢是一个中国书法的教室，但是当他们书写以后呢，他们发现原来这些文字都是自己可以读懂的。
When they first entered the classroom, they thought it was a Chinese calligraphy classroom, but when they began to practice, they realized that it was something that they could read.
这个时候呢，观众呢就得到了一个非常特殊的经验，是过去从来没有的。
And at this point, the audience had a very, very special, unique experience that they'd never had before.
Yeah, we can see this little, L-I-T-T-L-E， 这是 B-O， 这是 people, right? P-E-E-P.
Yeah, peep.
Little but peep.
Yeah.
Has lost my ship. Yeah. 这个是我们小的时候在中国呢训练一个人如何写毛笔字的开始的方式。
This is the method by which young people, us in China, as young people, would begin to learn the methods of calligraphy.
Yeah. 这是 Red Line Tracing Book. Right?
Red line tracing.
Yeah. 这个是我们做的教科书里面的一页。
This is a page from the instructional book.
我们可以说看这个表格是吧 ？A B C D， 实际上变化并不多。
In fact, the changes are not that large.
只是这个笔触的用笔的风格的变化。
It's just a change in the style of the use of the brush.
但是我们不能够相信这个书呢，实际上是一本英文书。
It's hard for us to believe that this is actually an English book.
比如说这块儿哈，如果你写这个题呢，就是要这个不能够写的 not look like a soft worm。如果你寫成像軟蟲子一樣，就不成功的。
Yeah, so with this stroke, you can't draw it in a way that appears to be a soft piece of wood. A worm, sorry, a soft worm.
Not look like a soft worm.
Worm.
Yeah. 这些东西呢，其实都是来自于非常传统的中国的关于书法的入门教学的一些内容。
This is all content from very traditional Chinese introductions to calligraphy practice.
都是非常认真的。
They're all very serious.
这是它的 copy book。
This is the copy.
这是 HYJGZ，right？ 这块 WEIT。这是我的书法作品，当然这个是比较早期的作品，不如这次在这儿展览的2幅写得好。
This is a calligraphy work of mine. It's an early one, and it, of course, isn't nearly as good as the works that are on display here now.
这是中国的古诗，但是被翻译成了英文，然后再被写成我的英文方块字。
This is an ancient Chinese poem that has been translated into English and then rewritten in my calligraphy.
大家现在可能都可以读了，是吧？
Now everybody can probably read these.
你只要是从上到下，从左到右，从外到内。
As long as you read from top to bottom, left to right, inside to outside.
对，WHICH is right. INFINITE. That's my name. Yeah. 这个叫英文方块字，我觉得这个想法其实很有意思啊，因为呢，我在很多地方做讲演呢，有些人就说呢，说的中国人是不是挺不高兴的？说你把中文改成英文了啊？我说中国人挺高兴的，因为我把英文改成中文了啊。
This idea is very, very interesting. And in a lot of lectures, people come up to me and say that Chinese people must be very unhappy that you turn Chinese into English. And I respond, no, Chinese people should be happy because I've taken English and turned it into Chinese.
实际上，这样的书法呢，它确实是把两个截然不同的书写体系硬给它压在一块儿了。
So this type of calligraphy is in fact taking two systems of writing and pressing them together.
所以它们就成了一种表里不一的文字。
So they become a kind of lettering or a kind of text that looks different on the inside and the outside.
或者说是戴着面具的文字。
Or a type of writing that is wearing a mask.
我做的工作呢，就有点像这个中国古代的这个包办婚姻似的，愣把两个人给压在一块儿，捏在一块儿，合适不合适都得在一块儿。
It's kind of like the traditional approach to forced marriage, taking two people and pressing them together, and whether or not they're appropriate together, they're together.
因为我们有这个，其实我们有中文的概念，什么是中文？我们也有英文的概念，什么是英文？
We have this concept of English, what English is, and we have this concept of Chinese, what Chinese is.
但是在这样的书法面前呢，我们没有一个现成的概念来读它。
But in front of this kind of calligraphy, we don't have a ready-made conceptual framework for approaching it and reading it.
我的作品呢，其实很多作品都是，给人的正常的习惯思维呢制造一个障碍。
A lot of my works present a barrier to people's normal ways of thinking.
这个时候呢，就是他的习惯的思维呢会受到一个阻碍。这个阻碍以后呢，会就像 computer 死机一样的，然后再重新启动的时候，它会打开更多的思维的空间。
When I give people's habits of thinking an interruption, it's like a computer dying, but then it comes back with more ways of thinking.
前年呢，其实我们收到过澳大利亚的教育部的一封信，他们呢在做一个新的一个 IQ 测验，IQ 系统。
A few years ago, we received a letter from the Australian Ministry of Education that they were designing a new IQ testing system.
他希望我们呢得到我们的一个 proof 呢，把我们这种书写的系统呢放在他们的 IQ 的系统中。
They'd hope to gain our agreement, our approval to put our way of writing into their IQ testing system.
因为呢，这个实际上读中文和读英文呢，我们使用的大脑的部分呢是不一样的。
Because when we read Chinese and when we read English, we're using two different parts of our brain.
当然，在有些地方找工作，就是说有些公司呢，特别是在亚洲的一些国家找工作，这个公司呢测验这个应聘的员工呢，他们有时候用这个字呢给这个应聘的人看。
And people that are looking for employees, particularly in Asia, will use these characters and show them to potential prospective employees to see if they can read them.
测验他们的这个思维的转换的能力，甚至测验他们的这个幽默感。
They are testing both their ability to change between ways of thinking and even test their sense of humor.
在这个展览里面呢，就是明天要开幕的部分呢，还有一件作品呢，叫这个 Book from the Ground。
In this exhibition, in the part that's going to open tomorrow, there's another work called Book from the Ground.
这是一本很有意思的书。这本书呢，是世界上任何一个人都可以读懂的。
This is a very interesting book. It's a book that anyone in the world can read.
因为它是用我们收集来的 icon 写成的。
It's written with icons that we've collected.
这本书呢，实际上讲了一个人的一天的24小时的生活，1个小时一个章节。
The book talks about the 24 hours in the life of a character, with each chapter being 1 hour.
这本书的题目就叫从点到点，它的第一个字儿是一个点儿，到最后一章是一个点。
The name of the book is From Point to Point. You can see at the beginning of the first chapter is a point.
8点钟的时候从家里坐地铁去公司。
At 8 o'clock, he leaves his home and he takes the subway to work.
9点呢上网看信。
At 9 o'clock, he gets online and reads his email.
10点呢是 break time。
10 o'clock is break time.
Starbucks, sit down there, chat。这个11点呢，这个现在很多人在上班的时候，经常是干一些别的事情，这是上交友网。
So this is 11 o'clock. A lot of people now, when they go to work and get online, are actually doing other things. This is looking for friendship online.
这个12 o'clock 这个决定吃什么是吧？
At 12 o'clock, he's deciding what to eat, etc., etc.
等等，比如这个是 开始了，是吧
This is？the
一个
start.
点儿放大、放大、放大，一个地球，最后地球上有一个城市，再放大有一个 apartment，有一个这个叫什么一个
Building.
住宅，
Yeah.
一个。
So you can see from the start, it begins with a point and it gets larger and larger to a globe and then a city and then a residence.
然后继续放大，在一个房子前面有一个鸟，这个鸟呢在叫。
As it gets bigger, you see in front of the building a bird, and the bird is singing.
The singing， 一个人呢在睡觉，然后这个 song 呢进入他的这个梦。
Singing, and the man is sleeping, and the sound of the song of the bird enters into his dreams.
对，闹钟在响，然后这鸟还在叫。
The alarm clock rings, and the bird continues singing.
这个闹钟还在响，然后这鸟不叫了，飞走了。
The alarm clock continues to ring. The bird stops singing and flies away.
不管怎么样，最后他起来了。然后呢，他是，就是说他起床了，是吧？然后呢，他很快的去了洗手间，是吧？但是呢，他好像是上不出来，是吧？
So regardless, he gets up and he gets up quickly and goes to the shower. And,
不是 shower， 去那个。
to the bathroom. Sorry, the bathroom.
Yeah.
And he's having some trouble.
Yeah， 然后他是 thinking what problem my stomach？ And he's waiting，waiting 人上这个 Facebook。
And he gets onto Facebook. He's reading.
So they got it, right? And they flash, right? Flash out.
Yeah.
这个第一章，你说这第一章都是讲他这个上班之前的。
The first chapter talks about everything that happens before he goes to work.
这本书呢，从开始呢是一些收集来的符号的剪贴，到最后呢被整理过了以后呢，就更像文字。
The beginning of the book starts with icons that were collected and pasted, and when you get to the end, they become organized and simplified, and they appear to be more like a language.
这本书呢，没有任何一个传统文字。
This entire book has no traditional words in it.
这本书有意思呢是什么呢？是因为是它和我们过去对文化的概念呢是有所颠覆的。
What's so interesting about this is it kind of overturns what our ideas are of culture, the culture that we have.
比如说，我们以前对文化的界定呢，要看这个人的属于哪个文化地域的，他的文化的教育的程度。
The way we used to appraise a person was to look at his cultural level, to appraise his cultural background.
但是这本书面前呢，这些标准都不工作。
But in front of this book, none of these standards work.
对这本书的阅读能力呢，不取决于你是哪个文化范围的和你的教育程度高低，只取决于你介入当代生活的广度和深度。
To read this book has nothing to do. It doesn't rely on the breadth of your education or your educational background, but instead the depth and breadth to which you've entered into modern life.
所以这本书呢，就成了一本在世界各地任何地方出版都不用翻译的小说。
It's become a novel that can be published anywhere in the world without translation.
现在实际上呢，在很多地方出版。
And in fact, now it's already been published in many, many places.
在中国最流行的杂志上连载。
And it's been serialized in the most popular magazine in China.
实际上，这个想法呢，最早呢，是从这个我们都知道这个是吧？这个5个标志，我看到这个东西开始的。
This began, and everybody knows these symbols. It began with these 3 symbols here.
因为我想呢，用这个几个 symbol 呢，可以写一个短短的故事。
I thought that I could use these 3 symbols, to write a short story.
但是我一定是可以用成千上万的 symbol 写一个长的故事出来。
But I could use the tens of thousands of symbols to write a much longer story.
所以我们从那时候开始呢，就收集世界各地的这些标志。
And from that point on, we began to collect symbols and icons from all over the world.
我们有一个原则呢，就是这里面的 icon 没有一个是我们自己创造的。
We had a principle that none of the icons were icons that we created.
因为呢，收集来的 icon 呢，实际上就像文字一样，它是约定俗成的，是大家可以认知的。
So icons that we collect have the value of that they're already existing, that they are legible, that they're pre-formed.
当然，在这个做这本书的同时呢，我们还做了这个英文的字库的软件。这个软件呢，你打入英文进去呢，它会自然的生成 icon 的 language。
And while we were making the book, we also developed an English language software. You enter in English, and characters, the icons, will automatically appear.
你看这个其实很容易读的是吧？
It's very easy to read.
当然呢，下面是中文的，我们呢同时也有一个中文的软件。
And of course, at the bottom is Chinese. We also were making at the same time a Chinese version.
当然你打中文的时候，它也变成了 Icon Language。
And when you enter Chinese, it also becomes an icon language.
这个时候呢，这个不同的语言之间，中文和英文之间，它就可以进行交流。
And with this, between English and Chinese, two different languages, you can instigate communication.
刚才那个是在 MoMA 的一个展览。
This is an exhibition at MoMA.
在这个展览，在我们这个展览中呢，有一部分呢是我们把我们工作室做这个地书的这个 corner 的内容呢搬到了展厅里面。
In one exhibition, we took our studio and moved it into the exhibition space.
因为我是想表达，这个 project 呢实际上是一个没完没了的工作。
I wanted to express that this is an unfinishable project.
因为我实际上做这个东西呢是在10年以前开始的。
In fact, I started this project 10 years ago.
但是实际上呢，到去年呢，这本书才出来。
But this book only came out last year.
当然我在做很多别的事情，但是有人说呢，你在10年以前或者8年以前的时候呢，这本书是写不出来的。
And of course, I was doing many other things, but people have said to me that 8 years ago, 10 years ago, this book wasn't writable.
因为实际上在这个8年以来呢，人类的这些标志和这些 icon 和这个 expression face， 实际上是迅速的在发展。
In that 8 years, icons and pictograms and emoticons have been emerging with incredible speed.
比如说这个表示 location 表示地点这个小图钉，就是在这个 Google Map 出来以后才有。
For instance, the icon that represents a location only came out after Google Maps was developed.
而且在很短的时间呢，全世界的人呢都认识这个 icon。
And within a short time, people throughout the world now recognize what this icon means.
就像北京奥林匹克运动会的这个标志，或者伦敦奥林匹克运动会的这个标志，在一夜之间，全世界的人都可以认识。
Just like the logo for the Beijing Olympics or the London Olympics, in one night, everyone around the world can recognize it.
在今天这个世界呢，这个无时无刻的不通过各种各样的现代传播的方式，向全世界的人进行着认读 icon 的教育。
So at every moment of every day, people throughout the world, through every form of media, are being educated in this reading of icons.
实际上呢，我们的生活和几千年以前截然不同，但是我们使用的传统文字和语言与几千年以前是一样的。
Even though our lives are completely different from the lives of humans thousands of years ago, the words and expressions and language that we use has remained the same.
所以我们就可以知道，就是说，传统语言在如何的不适应今天的人类的共同的工作和生活的方式。
So we can realize how unsuited these traditional languages are to the situation of today of working and living together.
所以呢，我们从年轻人的很多反应中呢，和很多的这种，比如说国际的这种商业的活动，广告的活动和这种公益的活动，我们都可以看到人类在试图要找到一种更便捷的、更视觉的、更直接的方式来沟通。
We can see that there is this attempt to create a more direct, more visual, more easily understood method of communication through the activities of the youth, through the activities of large corporations, and through the activities of NGOs and charitable organizations.
在今天呢，实际上是要我说呢，是开始了新一轮的象形文字的时期。
As I see it, today it's the beginning of a new phase, a new cycle of pictographic language.
这是有些孩子看了这展览以后，用这样的方式呢回家写的作文。
This is examples of children who, having seen the exhibition, returned home and did their homework using this language.
这是连载的一个情况啊。
This is the serialized version of the story.
下面呢，我再介绍一下这个展览 里面的第一件作品就是这个 background story。
Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about another work in this exhibition, background story.
这是在大英博物馆的展示的一件 background story， 是他复制的他们的一件收藏。
This is a version of the background story presented at the British Museum, which was a version of a painting in their collection.
这是 original， 看不见。All right, OK， 这是 original，
There's the original.
这次在这个 MassMocha 呢，复制的是大都会的一件作品。
At this exhibition at MassMocha, it's a replication, a version of a painting in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
这件作品呢，最早呢，实际上是在德国柏林的这个 Asian Art Museum 做的。
This series was first done at the Asian Art Museum of Berlin.
因为当时呢，那个 Darling Museum 呢，丢失了在二战的时候丢失了95%的作品，被苏联红军给抢走了。
The Darlin Museum had lost 95% of their collection of Asian paintings by the invading Russian Red Army.
现在两个国家还在 argue 这个事情。
And the two countries are still arguing about this.
我当时在那儿做了一个回顾的一个展览，但是我一般展览呢，我都希望有一个新的作品，所以呢，我就一直在想，在 Darling Museum 做一个什么东西。
I was doing a large-scale retrospective exhibition, but when I do these exhibitions, I always like to do something new as well. And I was thinking about what I could do for the Darlin Museum.
Darling Museum 呢，它实际上是这个有那个展厅的一圈呢，实际上都是展柜，展柜的后面有一个通道。
In the exhibition space of the Darlin Museum, it's surrounded by display cases, and behind these glass display cases, there is a pathway.
然后我看了这空间以后呢，我其实很快就去了西班牙。在这个去西班牙的从德国到西班牙转机的过程中呢，我看到那个机场啊，它那有些办公室的毛玻璃的后面呢，放了一些花。这些花从前面看呢，我觉得哎呀，这个东西很像中国的山水画，中国的水墨画。
At the time, I had to leave and I had to go to Spain, and when I was transferring between planes, heading back from Spain to Germany, I saw that there was this milky glass in some of the offices, and against the milky glass, behind the milky glass were plants. And seeing it from the front, it appeared to be very close to Chinese ink painting, Chinese landscape painting.
但实际上，我相信我过去一定是看过类似的这种景象，但是呢，由于我脑子里一直想着Darlin 的这个 museum 这个历史以及这些展柜，所以呢，它给了我一个灵感。我才有了这个 background story 这样的想法。
I'm sure that I had seen that kind of phenomena before, but because I was thinking in my mind about the museum at Darlin, about the display cases, only then did I have that inspiration to make this work.
但是对艺术家来说呢，获得这个灵感呢，他有的时候是非常偶然的。
As an artist, being inspired is a very sort of sudden, random experience.
对，今天我看到这个木头，也可能我会根据这个木头做一个作品。但是呢，这些东西是偶然的，可实际上你的艺术要找的那个东西呢，它一定不是偶然的，是你艺术家脑子里一直在想的事情。
For instance, if I look at this piece of wood right now, I think maybe I want to do a work that has to do with wood. Of course, inspiration is sudden, but the artist in making the work itself is not sudden. He has to have this idea before he can make something.
对，就是等于是在你的思维中构成一个问题。
There is a problem that's been produced within your thinking.
这个作品呢，你到后面看呢，它又可以看到的是这样的一些由树枝啊、垃圾啊、一些我们身边随处可见的东西做成的。
When you go behind the work, you can see branches, you can see garbage, you can see the things that you see everywhere in your life.
实际上，我们呢，就是把这个透明的玻璃呢，变成了一个 milky glass。
We've taken transparent glass and turned it into milky glass.
对，然后我们在这个 milky glass 后面呢，放一些东西。如果你紧紧贴着这个 milky glass， 从前面看的时候呢，你就可以看到比较清晰的形象。
And we put these objects on the back of the milky glass, and if you put it very, very close to the surface, if you put it tightly close to the surface, you can see a very clear image of the object behind.
但是你给它离开一点空间的时候呢，它就开始虚化了。就像中国的水墨画。
If you give a little bit of space between the object and the glass, it becomes slightly less defined and more like a Chinese traditional painting.
对，就是 实际上我们做的工作是什么呢？就是我们在调节空间中的光的状态。
The work we're doing actually is we're adjusting the light in between spaces.
然后呢，由这块毛玻璃呢，从空间中插过去呢，而记录了光的状况。
And by placing this sheet of milky glass, we're recording the state of the light in that position.
它就像就是像像 X 光的一个这个什么切片一样。
It's kind of like a X-ray film, an X-ray slide film.
为什么要有这种光的绘画？因为我当时在大英博物馆展览的时候，那个 Jane Store 那个策展人他说你这是一种光的绘画，我觉得他这个说法是很有意思。
Why am I calling it painting with light? At the time when I was doing this exhibition, the curator, Jan Stewart, said that you're painting with light, and I thought it was a very interesting way to describe it.
因为我觉得光呢，比任何的物质材料，画布也好，颜料也好，宣纸也好，墨也好，都要丰富。
As I see it, light compared to things like canvas or paint or Schwen paper or ink is much, much richer.
当然这组作品呢，让我就是说对中国的绘画和中国的艺术呢有更多的认识。
Through this series of works, I have a better understanding. I have more understanding of traditional Chinese painting and Chinese art.
比如说一个树枝，这些都是树枝，是吧？一个树枝呢，它可以表现一棵树。
For instance, this branch, a single branch, can show a tree.
A tree， 对。
A whole tree.
当然呢，一个树叶的这个叶茎，它也可以表现一棵树。
And even a leaf from a tree, its form can express a tree.
就像一个石头可以表现一个山一样。
Just the way that a single rock can form an entire mountain.
就像中国那个小的盆景。
Just like Chinese 盆景是。
盆景是bonsai。
bonsai.
Bonsai.
Just like bonsai.
Yeah, bonsai. 我觉得是，对。是什么呢？为什么呢？就是说，因为呢，中国的绘画呢，其实都是符号化的。
Because Chinese painting is actually symbolicized. It's a signify.
中国这个树字这个符号，其实呢，它就是画了一棵树。
The character for tree is actually drawing a tree.
所以用这种方法呢，我想呢，很难复制油画，但是却能复制意象的中国画。
This kind of approach is very difficult to replicate oil painting, but it is capable of doing sort of fictional landscapes.
对，就是意境的，就是说那个算是有点抽象的，或者说这个是吧？
So sort of abstracted Chinese landscapes.
对，就是意象的，它算是一个，可能丽都应该知道意象。
Expressive.
Expressive. Okay, thank you.
Expressive landscape.
对，这次展览呢，大家都很喜欢这个凤凰这件作品我也很高兴。
In this exhibition, everybody likes the phoenix, which makes me very happy.
这个凤凰这个作品呢，它我现在做一个简单的一个背景的介绍。实际上最早呢是为了这个 WFC 这个北京 CBD 的这个建筑而做的。
I'll give a simple explanation of the background of the phoenix. Originally, it was a work that was made for the World Financial Center in Beijing Central Business District.
其实当时呢，我刚回中央美术学院，然后呢，这个我不太接受这种公共艺术，但是那个甲方呢，他就说你要来接受这个东西呢，也许我们可以给美术学院一些资助。
I had just returned to the Central Academy of Fine Arts, and I usually don't accept public artwork commissions, but the commissioning party approached me and said, well, if you consider accepting it, we may be able to give some funding to the Central Academy.
然后我刚回去呢，我觉得如果我能找些钱给学校呢，也是不错的
感觉
我挺能干的。
I had just gotten back to the Central Academy, and I figured that if I could bring them a little bit of money, it would be good, and that people think I was very capable.
然后我就去了工地，我说我可以去看一下
And so I went to the construction site, and I said that I would take a look.
但是当我进入这个工地现场以后呢，我感觉这个就是给我了非常强烈的震撼。
When I got to the construction site, it gave me a very, very strong sense of shock.
就像你接近一个大动物的时候，它的温度和它的皮肤的颤动，会给你一种叫什么？一种恐惧。
It's just like approaching a large animal. When you sense its temperature, when you see its skin moving, it's almost frightening.
这种恐惧来自于， 农民工的工作状况和他们的生活状况与中国到处可见的非常现代化的大楼之间的强烈的对比。
This sense of shock and fear came from seeing the conditions of the migrant laborers living and working, and the intense disparity between this and these huge modern buildings around Beijing.
所以当时呢，我就想到用这些材料，用这个建筑这个大楼的垃圾做一件东西，挂在这个大楼中间。
And so at the time, I had this idea to use this trash, this waste from the construction of these huge modern buildings, to make a work that could be put inside the buildings.
这个时候呢，我就很想做这件作品。
And that's when I started really wanting to make this work.
我就开始担心甲方呢不接受这个想法。
And I began to worry that the commissioning party wouldn't accept this idea.
但是甲方当时是接受了啊。
But the commissioning party accepted it at the
所以
time.
我们就开始工作啊。
So we started to work.
对，这个因为那个空间非常的大，它是一个巨大的玻璃房，但是呢，它呢是用这个玻璃房，实际上你可以感觉到它是一个大的笼子一样。
It was a huge space, a huge glass space, and it appeared in many ways as a cage when you looked at it.
所以呢，我当时就想到做两个东西向前奋飞的，它有点好像是关在笼子里，但是实际上它好像意识不到这个笼子。
Seeing that space, I wanted to make two objects flying forward inside the cage, unaware of the cage that they were stuck in.
这是我们当时的一个 team， 这个 team 呢主要都是农民工。
This was our team at the time. Our team was primarily made up of migrant laborers.
当然，这些农民工呢，我觉得他们真的是非常聪明。
My sense of this team was that they were really quite smart.
我在想，如果他们接受过很好的教育，他们不知道会做出什么东西。
And I thought that if they had received a really great education, nobody knows what they could come up with.
这是当时在北京的第一次的展示。由于这个甲方呢，最后没有接受这个作品。
This is its first exhibition in Beijing outside because the commissioning party in the end wouldn't accept the work.
因为其实这个作品呢，从最早4个月的一个计划，但是一直拖延了2年。
And because this work that began as a 4-month plan ended up taking 2 years to complete.
因为在这个过程中呢，这个北京呢，这个发生了奥林匹克运动会。奥林匹克运动会期间呢，3个月的时间就不能够，建筑工地不能够施工。
During the period of its making, the Olympics happened in Beijing, and during the Olympics, Beijing decided that all construction work had to stop for 4 months.
当然呢，我们的这个材料的来源也就没有了。
And of course, then we had no source for our materials for the work.
当然呢，这个奥林匹克运动会以后呢，接着就是经济危机。
And of course, after the Olympics, following on the Olympics, was the world financial crisis.
这时候呢，资本家的这种对艺术的容忍度和幽默感呢，就会发生变化。
And at that point, the level of acceptance and level of humor of capitalists towards artwork began to fade.
所以呢，他们就说的这个凤凰没有完，说的你们可能应该是需要外面包一层水晶什么的东西。
And so they started to say that, oh, your work doesn't seem to be quite finished. You should probably put a layer of crystal on the outside.
当然呢，这个2年以后完成的第一次展览呢，刚才说了是在今日美术馆的室外啊。这2年呢，实际上让这个凤凰本身呢，确实是折射了中国的今天的现实。
And in the 2 years ago, when this work was first exhibited outdoors at the Today Art Museum, it's taken on 折射了中国今天的很多。
中国今天的一种现实吧，现实的这种气息。
It's taken on the sort of the flavor of Chinese reality, contemporary Chinese reality.
下面我再谈一点这个，就是说这个凤凰的这2只凤凰，它在艺术上的一些的考虑啊。
Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the artistic considerations that went into making the phoenix.
实际这2个 phoenix 很大，我们看到了，对，它呢就是说这个，其实很费劲儿的地方，我们一共其实做了4只，因为有2只是试验好了以后，再把这个觉得合适的这些东西再搬到正式的这个东西上。
This work is huge, as you've seen, and the most difficult part, the most taxing part, was that we had 4 phoenixes. 2 were experimental, and in the experimental versions, when we found the appropriate relationship of materials, we would move it to the final version.
实际上这两个凤凰呢，如果让它变得有意思，它的这些不同的材料，它一定要放在它应该放的位置上。
To make this work interesting, the materials that we found would have to be put in the appropriate place, the place where the material should be.
比如说这个部分呢，我们当时呢其实是非常难处理的啊。
For instance, this part was the part that was very difficult for us to deal with at the time.
但是现在呢，处理成这个样子，我觉得是有意思的。
But now, having made it into this form, I think it's quite interesting.
为什么呢？因为呢，实际上呢，这个位置差不多就是飞机的驾驶舱的位置。
Yeah. 驾驶舱是那个。
驾驶舱就是说那个。
Oh yeah, yeah.
开飞机的人。
Yeah. Sorry, this position is very similar to the pilot's deck in a plane, a cockpit.
所以里头呢非常的精致，有各种各样的工具。
It's very refined with lots of types of tools.
比如说像这些羽毛，它是由这种铁锹构成的。
For instance, these feathers are created with shovel heads.
实际上，这个每一个铁锹的这个部分呢，和这个羽毛的这个部分的作用是一样的，它都是要让这个东西变得更强、更结实。
And this part of the shovel is very similar to that part of a feather, that it's supposed to take on weight and make it stronger.
实际上，这个我们的很多的用具其实都是仿生学的。
Many of the tools that we use come from the study of the replication of things in nature.
所以呢，它这个很多的部分呢，要让它就是有一种内在的合理性，这个东西它就会产生美感。
With this, there's a kind of internal logic that produces a beauty.
也会产生幽默感。
It will also produce a sense of humor.
比如说这个部分呢，它是用很多的那种装修材料做出来的。它呢，我总觉得这个东西很像中国的皮影的风格。
So this part is made out of lots of materials from renovations, and I've always felt that it looks like Chinese shadow puppetry.
实际上这个作品呢，做在过程中呢，我开始感觉到呢，这件作品很像中国的民间艺术。
In making this work, I began to feel that it really resembled Chinese folk art.
因为它和西方的当代艺术的手法呢，在本质的部分非常不同。
It's very different in many essential ways from the Western approaches to contemporary art making.
对
，methods.
对，因为呢，用现成材料当然是很多艺术家都用。
Using ready-made materials is something that many artists have done.
对，但是这件作品呢，它和中国民间手段的这个本质呢是非常有关系的。
It's very connected in essence to the methods used in Chinese folk art.
因为呢，中国呢民间艺术呢，基本上是用一些最低廉的材料做一些东西呢，能够表达对未来的生活的寄托和向往。
The method of Chinese folk art is to use the most inexpensive, the cheapest materials to express their hopes for the future and for their lives.
当然这样的手法呢，在中国民间的艺术的手段中呢是有的，比如说，我们用什么老玉米啊、老玉米的胡须啊、老玉米的这个叶子呀等等，做各种各样的东西。
You see this in Chinese art, using corn husks and corn silk to make beautiful objects.
比如说用这种树根呢，然后根据这树根的造型啊，然后再给它做成雕塑。
Using roots from trees and using its form, its pre-existing form, to make something beautiful. Make a sculpture.
当然了，这个凤凰我们也看到了，里头藏了很多的 LED 灯。
As you can see, the phoenix also has many LED lights within it.
实际上呢，白天呢你基本上看不见。
And during the day, you can't really see them.
但是随着这个夜晚的光线的变化呢，这些灯就会显现出来。
With the change of light as evening approaches, these lights will become more and more apparent.
等这个天更黑的时候呢，这些东西全都看不见，只有这个很平的、很远的两个凤凰的星系在天空。
At night, when it's dark, you cannot see them at all. You can see very flat, very distant phoenix constellations hanging midair.
这两只凤凰呢，近处看的时候呢，它非常的凶猛，而且呢，它好像是用一些很低廉的材料呢， 把自己打扮得非常的漂亮和非常的有尊严。
When you approach these phoenixes, these two phoenixes, from a close distance, they appear very fierce. They've used this cheap material to make themselves beautiful, and give themselves a sense of self-respect.
但是当你离得很远看，或者说到夜晚的时候呢，最后它们就变成了非常柔美的，两个和我们的现实非常有距离的东西。
But at a distance or at night, they begin to appear very soft and beautiful, something very distant from our own reality.
下面呢，再介绍一下这个虎皮地毯这个作品。
Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the tiger skin rug work.
虎皮地毯呢，实际上是整个的烟草计划里面的一件作品。
The tiger skin carpet is one piece in the Tobacco Project series of works.
烟草计划呢，最早是在差不多可能是89年以前，在杜克大学开始的。
Yeah, the Tobacco Project began, in truth, probably at around 1998 at Duke University.
这个因为 Duke 他是这个烟草起家的，大家都知道啊，所以呢，我就做了一个烟草计划。这个烟草计划有大大小小的各种各样的作品构成的，比如说这个呢是一个长的一个清明上河图，上面放了一条长长的烟，然后这个烟呢自然的在燃烧。之后呢，它就会留下一个燃烧的一个印子。
The Duke family grew on tobacco. The series of works includes many small and large works. The work that I just showed was the Qingming Festival on the river, on which I placed a very long cigarette that burned slowly across its surface, leaving a mark as it burned.
这个呢是一个用黄金叶做成的一本大书，这上头呢实际上是手工印刷的。杜克最早为什么是去中国卖烟的这样的一个历史。
This is a book made out of bright leaf tobacco and printed by hand, and the contents describes why the Duke family went to China very early to sell tobacco.
这当然有各种各样的作品。这个呢是一个 rolling book， 这上头呢实际上是印的是一本书，这本书是Duke 的历史。
There are many small and large works in this series. That was the rolling book that is actually printed with the text of a book about the Duke family.
Yeah, this is my brand cigarette. Yeah, you're hard to decision the smoked from which side. Yeah. 这是这个烟草计划这个项目呢，它是一个流动的计划，而且它是一个不断发展的计划。由于我在做研究的时候呢，发现了杜克和中国之间的关系。
The Tobacco Project is a moving project, a project that's not unending. And in my research, I began to understand the connection between Duke and China.
所以呢，我们就在上海呢又做了一次 Tobacco Project.
So we did a tobacco project in Shanghai as well.
然后我们根据上海的烟草的历史做了一些新的作品。
And we made new works that discussed the history of tobacco in Shanghai.
然后去年呢，这个 Tobacco Project 在这个 Virginia Art Museum 展览。
And last year, the Tobacco Project was again exhibited at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts.
然后根据这个 Virginia 的这个烟草的历史，我们又补充了一些新的作品。
And based on the Virginia history of tobacco, we added even more new works.
这是一本特殊的这个 artist 的book， 它是什么呢？用很多老的这个 Virginia 的烟草的品牌写的一首诗。
This is a very special, unique artist book that's made with stencils from early Virginia tobacco brand names.
这是由那个作家瑞内他来写的，因为我把这些品牌呢字呢给他，他根据这些字呢写了一首诗。这个书翻完了以后，这首诗就读完了。
And I gave the stencils that I selected to Rene, who is a friend and author, and he composed them into a poem. And through reading through the book, you get to the end and you can read the contents of a poem.
这是最早在上海做的这个虎皮地毯的一个情况。
That's the state of the first tiger skin carpet that we made in Shanghai.
这是在咱们这儿展览的这件作品。大家要注意到，就是说我从这边看的时候有点像一个虎皮地毯，但是我从那边看呢，它好像变成了一个 zebra 的一个。
What everybody should pay attention to, this is the tiger skin carpet on display here. That from the front it looks like a tiger skin, but if you go to the back, it resembles a zebra skin.
它实际上是 有点像你围着它转的时候，它那个光线会随着你在变化。
It's almost as if when you walk around it, the light follows you.
最早展览的时候有很多的很重的这个烟草的味道。
In the earliest time that we exhibited, it had a very, very strong aroma of tobacco.
这个现在我们在这个 install 的这个作品呢，还有一个很17分钟的一个叫什么一个卡通 book。
In the exhibition, we also have a 17-minute long animation.
这个题目就叫 character。
The title is The Character of Characters.
实际上这个作品呢，我这块儿给大家放几段。
I'm going to show everyone a few segments.
看看啊。看看啊，对不起啊。
他找不到这个，
可能是
他找不到这个原件。
可能是这块儿，我试试这个吧。
他找不到这个根据，还不存在。
可能这个它可能不能够那什么，因为它是软件，可能那什么。
对，他说伪造。
对，这样吧，反正那个明天大家可以看到这个。
Tomorrow you can see it in the exhibition.
对，但是我谈一下这个作品。这个作品呢，实际上是，我用这个卡通的方式呢。等于是写了一篇像一个论文一样。
I'm going to tell you a little bit about the work. I use this method of animation cartoons to write something like a thesis.
实际上谈的是什么呢？就是说，中国人的性格和中国人的哲学的态度和中国人看事情的方法，与中国人几千年以来使用这个汉字的关系。
What it talks about is the connection between the character of the Chinese people, their philosophical attitudes, and how they see the world, and its connection to the writing system that they've been practicing for thousands of years.
这个，因为中文呢，它实际上是和世界上其他文字都不一样。这个不一样来自于中国人的发音和其他的民族有所不同。
Chinese is very different from any other language in the world. It comes in many ways from the way it's pronounced and the way that pronunciation differs.
因为中国人的发音呢是单音节的，比如单音节，它是一个单字儿，一个单的符号对一个单这个音。
Chinese is a single spoken pronunciation to a single character.
但是呢，更多的民族的发音呢属于黏着音的，像英文呢就是黏着音，它是为了表示过去式或者复数，它在一个词的后面加一个音的变化。
So English is, and in other languages, is anyone here a linguist? 黏着式. I think it's agglutinative. I think it's an agglutinative language where changes in tense and in mood are accomplished by adding to the end of the word.
实际上，很多语言呢，很多文字最早呢，其实都带有象形性，但是由于呢发音的特点呢。它不能够发展、延续这个象形的这个符号。
Many languages began as pictographs, but because of the connection to the way languages are spoken, they didn't support the development of spoken languages.
但是这个但是中文呢，它却可以这样延续下来，所以现在中文呢，差不多是唯一的活着的一种古老的文字。
But Chinese could support that continued use, so it is almost as if Chinese is the only example.
活着的不是古老文字，是一个象形的文字。
The only remaining surviving pictographic language.
所以呢，中国人的性格呢和这一点呢是非常有关系的，因为呢，我们使用这种文字使用了几千年。
The Chinese character is very connected to this approach to writing because we've been using this form of writing for thousands of years.
比如说，我们中国人接受教育，每一个人开始呢要花很多的时间，几年的时间要记住这些符号。
For instance, in Chinese education, children have to spend years of time remembering how to write these specific symbols.
比如说，中国的文化中呢，有很强的拷贝的文化的性质。
And there's a very strong quality of a copying culture in China.
这个，所以这个为什么这个中国人今天那种山寨版，我觉得都跟这个文化其实是有关系的。
So why is there this sort of idea of sort of bootlegging in China. It's called Shanzhaiban. It's all connected to this.
实际上，那个中国人呢非常喜欢名牌儿，
Chinese really like famous brands.
可能是亚洲的国家，日本人呐、什么的，韩国人都是这样的。
Perhaps in Asian countries, Chinese or Japanese and Korean people are also the same way.
这和这个东方的这个文化中，或者中国的文化中对符号的看重是有关系的。
This is maybe connected in some way to the sort of importance of symbols in Eastern cultures or in Chinese culture.
因为在中国的艺术中呢，实际上在中国的文化中，符号性呢是非常重要的一个特点。
In Chinese art and in Chinese culture, symbols have an incredible importance.
比如说，在中国的绘画中呢，总是画梅兰竹菊。这个梅兰竹菊呢，它实际上代表了4种类型的人格。
In Chinese painting, you paint 梅兰菊。
梅花儿、兰花、
Okay,
竹子和这个菊花。
Okay, so a rose, a peony, plum, orchid, bamboo, and jasmine.
菊花。
Chrysanthemum.
对
They're always painting these 4 flowers.
在中国的戏剧中呢，这些都是非常脸谱化的，有各种各样的代表各种性格的脸谱。
And in Chinese opera, there is an incredible emphasis on masks, each or sort of makeup with each stylization representing specific character.
中国学习绘画呢，它也是纸抄纸的，它是要拷贝过去大师的作品。
In Chinese studying of painting, it's paper copying paper, replicating the work of the masters.
在中国的说话中呢，也是，就是4字成语很重要，所有的复杂的事情呢，都要归纳成4个字来表达。
In Chinese spoken language, it's the same with 4-character phrases. Very complex situations and ideas all have to be put into 4-character phrases.
至于这些细节呢，有时候不用管，但是呢，反正是这一类的事情呢，都用这4个字来表示。
The details aren't important, but for this kind of thing, you use 4 characters to describe it.
这个当然呢，中国人的性格呢，比如说中国人对关系的理解呢，也是有特殊性的。
There's also a unique quality to the Chinese view of connections.
是因为什么呢？因为中国人写字哈，第2笔根据第1笔来，第3笔根据前2笔来。
When Chinese write, the second stroke is related to the first stroke, and the third stroke is related to the first 2 strokes.
所以呢，其实中国文化呢是比较善于根据临时提供的条件而决定下一步该怎么办。
So Chinese culture is suited towards taking temporary circumstances and making decisions about what's going to happen next.
所以呢，这个美国有一位学者写了一本书呢，叫《寻路中国》，因为他在中国待了很长时间。
There's an American author that wrote a book about 寻路中国。
寻路就是说在找路，在中国找路吧。
Finding your way in China because he had spent many years in China.
那个他里头就提到呢，就是说他感受到中国人呢开车呢有一种汽车的身体语言。
He felt that in China, in driving, there's this kind of physical language of cars.
所以呢，所以很多人呢很不理解，中国人开车呢好像是可以乱开似的。这个2大堆人从不同的方向到十字路口呢，混成一团以后，然后各走各的路。
So many people don't understand how Chinese driving in China seems so chaotic that many groups of cars coming together in the same intersection all find their ways out, their direction.
因为由于事务法的长期的训练呢，它总是要考虑到一个事情发生的下一个阶段的内容。
Through lots of practice, they just see what the next step is after seeing the current situation.
比如2个车快碰到一起的时候呢，他们很快之间就可以开一个会，决定是你先走还是我先走。
For instance, when 2 cars get close to hitting, they can have a little meeting and decide who's going first.
这完全是在由感觉来决定的。
It's all decided by a sense of feel.
这个为什么呢？因为中国人写书法呢，都是写在宣纸上，而写中国人的艺术和书法呢，它的真正的秘诀在于 好的艺术家懂得怎么样给宣纸留出来由宣纸完成的部分，懂吗？有点复杂。
Yeah, so in Chinese calligraphy and Chinese painting, it all takes place on Xuan paper. And an artist that understands painting, that's a good artist, knows the most important thing is leaving a part for the Xuanzhi to decide, the Xuan paper to decide. So,
OK， 有些讨论或者提一些问题。
this is a good point to stop and begin the question and answer phase.
谢谢。